Welcome to Norse Code, the number one podcast for your Minnesota Vikings. I'm your host and producer. My name is James Pagashnik. Thank you guys so much for listening. And at the other end of the tin cannon string, we have our analyst and co-host. You know him from numerous blogs and podcasts around the internet, most notably from the Wide Left Substack. He is Mr. Useful Human, Arif Hassan. Arif, it's no longer Arif Week. It's now Justice Week. And as is usually the case, I'm already sick of the Green Bay Packers.
Yeah, me too. The Monday night game didn't help. Also, Monday night game may have interfered with the possibility of a conversation with Justice. I DM'd him this morning. I was like, hey, are we discoursing this week? Because that's how normal people talk to each other. And he was like...
Normal content providers, yes.
Right. And he was like, oh. And I was like, yeah. And he still hasn't responded. So we might see if there's a Justice interview.
Yeah.
The fact, nobody wants to record on Christmas Eve, and definitely nobody wants to record on Christmas. So we may not get one. I'm sorry to deprive the listeners of such insight.
Yeah, it's very possible. We'll see what ends up happening. All things are possible through the power of Ben DiNucci, but there's only so many things that DiNucci can do. I would have liked to have seen him throw a couple for the Saints, quite frankly. I don't think Rattler's the guy, but here we are. So the Vikings won in a good game, in a crazy game, because the Seahawks don't play normal games, but the Vikings won again. They've won 13 games. That
frauds.
Yeah, clearly frauds all the way down. They won without Harrison Smith. That was it was a bit of a surprise too. So this is a game that we'll be breaking down here. It was a fun victory, and the Vikings don't win in Seattle. That's just something they don't do. So it was a nice change of pace. So we'll be going over that, a little bit of around the league stuff, and the mailbag as well. But before we start, again, thank you guys so much for listening to Norse Code. If you enjoy the show and would like to help us out financially, there's a couple of different things you can do. You can go over to patreon.com/NorseCode for $3.50 a month, or a little less for the year subscription. You get access to the bonus material, get access to the Discord, all of that. And a special thank you to Washington Irving, who is our newest Patreon subscriber. And we've got a question from him in the mailbag, which we will be getting to when we start it up. You can also go to paypal.me/NorseCode as well for a one-time donation, or norsecode.threadless.com for any number of wonderful Norse Code merch items. Special reminder that I'm hoping to have the Christmas clip show out this year. So I'm hoping to put that out on Christmas Day. I am still furiously editing it to get it into its final form. What usually ends up happening is we end up giving one to everybody on Christmas Day, and then around New Year's, the Patreon people get theirs. So check that out. It's going to be full of stuff that you may not have heard. It's especially if you don't subscribe to the Patreon. It's some bonus material. It is some live show stuff. It's kind of best of questions of the year, stuff like that. So that is, and Arif and I yelling at each other, and there's a bunch of swearing. So if you've ever thought to yourself, I wonder what Norse Code would be like if they, didn't care about their iTunes rating, this is the episode to listen to.
Do we yell at each other, James?
Yes, actually, the last clip I did today, the last clip I had, you and I were just going at it. And
that doesn't sound like us. I appreciate you so much as a co-host, James.
We didn't,
and producer. Let's not forget the amount of work that you put in as a producer, James.
We didn't appreciate ourselves in this moment. This was not the Mutual Appreciation Society. This was not patting each other on the back for a good year. This was all-out war.
I can't wait.
I've decided that one has to be on the main show. That one has to go on the main show. It was a bit too funny. So, but we've got all sorts of great content that will be happening there. So I'm hoping to have that out on Christmas Day. So I may be staying up late the next day or so to knock that out. But that is coming. And we actually just finished recording something for the Patreon ones. So hopefully that will be out on New Year's Day. So all of that aside, let's get into the show itself. The Vikings won in Seattle. This was a rainy game. I was expecting this to be a little bit more or a little bit less rather of a passing game because of just how rainy and slick everything was, but that did not stop the Vikings from going over the top on Seattle early and often.
I think part of it's just the Vikings don't run the ball. Like it's just like that's just like part of it. Obviously, Seattle, once they fell like 2 scores behind, probably felt like they needed to pass a little bit more, but they were, at least early on, somewhat successful in the running game. That kind of slowed down over time, which maybe also contributed to them throwing the ball a little bit more. But yeah, I mean, I think that for most coaches, most of the time, the physical environment will kind of dictate, these kinds of decisions. I think for the Vikings, they really just don't. I think Kevin O'Connell is like, hey, I typically when I throw the ball, I get more yards than when I pass the ball. So why wouldn't I just do that? Very, very good, I think, heuristic, honestly.
It's like if I throw it, I get better than when I run it. Yeah, I get it. But this isn't also to say that the Vikings didn't run the ball. The Vikings actually ran the ball quite a bit with Aaron Jones.
Yeah, no. Jones was great. They did kind of stop running the ball in the second half. I remember because Luke Braun had the over on 64.5 rushing yards. And he was stuck at like 64 for like 12 minutes.
It just should have ended with that.
Yeah, I was like, hey, put Cam Akers in. I was pretty excited. But no, I mean, Aaron Jones ended up running for 67. He had a long of 14. For most of the game, he was sporting a record of about 4.0. By the end of the game, he had a record or a carry in average yards per carry of 3.7, mostly because he's running the ball and people are expecting him to run the ball late in the game. But generally, the Vikings did a pretty good job opening up lanes. Not an outstanding job or anything like that, generating some open lanes running. But a lot of the rushes came from Sam Darnold scrambles. I think there's 2 kneels in there, so he probably only had 3 true past the line of scrimmage rushing attempts, and I think all of them came on scrambles. But yeah, I think on those 3 he got something like 13, 14 yards. But yeah, the Vikings again. I mean, they threw the ball 35 times. They probably intentionally ran the ball 19 times. So it's still a pretty imbalanced game. But when they did decide to run the ball, which seemingly not in the third quarter, but when they did decide to run the ball, it was relatively effective. Again, the yards per carry numbers aren't great, but I think that from what they were attempting to accomplish, they did a pretty decent job getting Aaron Jones involved in the running game. But he was also involved in the passing game for about 26 yards, so he ends up with 93 yards or something like that. Another good game for him. Plus, hey, you didn't put the ball on the ground, so that's always a good day for him.
That is a very good day for him at that point. It was a fun game. A couple things that I want to touch on as far as the offense was concerned. The first thought I had was the fourth down. The fourth down where they went for it. They literally had Cam Akers and then they didn't end up using him. And I just sat there come on. Cam Akers is right there. Cam Akers is really good at just getting those extra yards. Sorry, I got distracted by a fleeting memory of Cam Akers. Yay, cough medicine. So I want to talk about Jefferson because Jefferson was able to get open, was able to make some fantastic catches. That second touchdown he got where he caught it while twirling in the air. Outstanding job from everybody. It was
great throw from Sam Darnold, great catch from Justin Jefferson, really good pass protection, which the Vikings offensive line actually did play a little bit better than it seems like given how often Darnold was hit, but still great pass protection. Everything was executed perfectly, 39-yard dot. Yeah, I don't know. Jefferson had a really good game because, obviously before that he had 105 yards. I brought him to 144. He was having an outstanding game. He still has a couple of, I think he's 120 yards away from catching up to Jamar Chase for the lead in the receiving title. But No, it's like another really good game from Jefferson. And like you said, that catch was outstanding. It's the second touchdown that brings him to double digits. Yeah, I don't know. Jefferson's, it kind of reminds me of that tidbit that I learned from the Louisiana sports science guy who also told this to Alec Lewis. And so Lewis published it, one of his pieces over at The Athletic. But that Jefferson does not have a dominant eye, which like most of us do. So like if you close one of your eyes, when you close one of them, your vision will shift. When you close the other one, your vision won't. And that's your dominant eye. And Jefferson doesn't have both eyes are dominant essentially. And so it's just as easy for him to track the ball over his left shoulder, his right shoulder, or to focus his near eye on whichever direction the ball is coming from. It just kind of reminds me of that. His ability to adapt really quickly to the ball in the air. I don't know, man. Like we saw kind of how effective his Griff mentioned on the podcast actually last week that one thing that kind of makes Jefferson stand out a little bit more among like the dozen things is that he has really long arms, right? We get to see kind of not on that throw necessarily, but we got to see in this game, how that kind of separates him from a lot of other receivers in similar positions. And in this one, on this throw, I don't know, man, just like kind of perfectly identifying, where he needed to be to deal with that safety coming up over the top. And then on top of that, avoiding the tackle to get the touchdown. Incredible.
So how exactly is he getting so open the last few games? I think he's got 5 touchdowns in 3 games, and he's getting doubled. He's getting hit. He is getting, but he's managing to break free. He's managing to get open. What is there something he and Darnold are doing?
I don't think so. Like I think part of it is just, Jordan Addison is getting the ball a lot more. And so it's kind of hard to continue putting that kind of attention on Jefferson. But also, like, as you've seen kind of over the years, as teams find different ways to cover him, he finds ways to adapt and get past that. So we had a couple of stretches of games, about 3, I want to say, where he wasn't getting outstanding production. And, those are the games where Jordan Addison's going off for 160 yards, CJ Hawkinson's going off for 110, stuff like that. And so, the games obviously weren't effective for the other teams when they tried that strategy. But like one thing we've learned is that there's a lot of ways to like double cover a receiver or to try and take them out of the game. And the Vikings have done a pretty good job of adapting to kind of whatever new approach teams have and finding a way out of it. So one thing, for example, that I think it was in New England a couple years ago did was that they focused a lot on like horizontal double teams where, because Jefferson runs all these over routes, these crossing routes, these square ins and stuff like that, where they'd have one guy cover the out and essentially any comeback routes like hitches and curls, and they'd have another guy cover in. And the guy covering out also covered deep, right? But he has outside leverage. And so it's actually pretty difficult to do that because you don't have the sideline helping you when you have outside leverage. And so the Vikings figured this out and we're just like, okay, well, every time it seems like you got 2 guys on you, just book it downfield. Jefferson is not by any stretch of the imagination the fastest receiver in the NFL or anything like that. But given those circumstances, he was able to very easily split these double teams when they expected him to go horizontal, and maybe many times those routes did call him to go horizontal. That's just one example. I'm not saying that's kind of what's happening in these games, but I think that they're figuring out kind of what the weaknesses to this kind of approach are. But yeah, they're innovating their ways kind of out of these particular approaches to double teams, and it just takes a couple of, maybe not even a couple of games, but it takes a little bit before they're like, okay, well, what are the weaknesses to this approach? What are they gaining from it? We kind of know what are the weaknesses. Can we exploit those weaknesses with Jefferson? If not, let's take advantage of it with Jordan Addison, DJ Hawkinson. And I think that that's like one reason that we saw him get out of this rut. Primarily, though, he's like just a really good receiver, right? Like it's just tough to cover him. Like he finds a way to get into space and get to where he needs to be, like where the landmark of the play is. And in doing so, he gets there before a defender gets there. He creates space. He knows kind of the game is not necessarily about, being faster than anyone, although he is plenty fast. The game is about creating exclusive access to the ball, or as some receivers have put, I think Sterling Sharp put it this way, creating exclusive real estate for the quarterbacks to find a place where the ball can be that only you can get access to it. Sometimes that can be, being faster than everyone else and moving up and down field, but it is often finding ways to position yourself so other people just can't reach the ball like you can. And he's got a pretty intuitive understanding of that approach, and he finds ways to create space. In this case, on that throw, he didn't need to do that. Sam Darnold did it kind of on his own, but a lot of times he'll kind of present a target or a hitbox, essentially, for a quarterback to throw the ball. And that's like one way that he consistently gets open. Like, he does it all the other ways too. He's explosive out of his breaks. He's fast enough. His route running is deceptive enough that it is difficult for cornerbacks to kind of keep a handle on him, especially in man coverage. He finds a way to get out of his breaks really quickly, and create, especially on those crossers that he loves so much, and create that additional space. Like, all of those matter, but I think a lot of it is just like an intuitive understanding of space and like where the ball needs to be and how to create ways for the quarterback to find exclusive trajectories for the ball. So I think that that's like the way that he gets it done, and it makes him the best receiver in the NFL.
So I knew the Vikings were going to win this game during the touchdown drive when the face mask got called. That seemed like it was so out of the blue.
A turn of fate. Yeah, so dramatic.
The moment that he got his face mask, and I loved that the Seahawk later, and it was like, it grazed it, it didn't grab it, and like then you see the picture, it's like, yeah, your fingers were inside, dude. It's a thing. But the moment that he got called for that, it's like, oh, perfect. We're gonna win this game. This is obviously like, this is the hero's journey. Well, this happens to us to us the last time that we're out on the West Coast. This is perfect. This is how this wraps up. Now we can focus on Green Bay, and we can focus on the Lions. Like, this is perfect. But I was like, I knew that was going to happen. It was great.
Yeah, the Alexander Madison misses the fourth down run, and that's the all is lost moment.
Yep. That's how this works. I don't make up the rules of all this. I just know that when we get called, when a quarterback gets called for this, it seems to be very rare. When this gets called, it's good. We can
So we've been like talking about how like Sam Darnold never gets called for these, and that is true, but it certainly does not seem like he is alone in not getting face mask calls. And so, so getting, and either like the league told some officials like, hey, these replays are making us look real bad. I think you got to take care of this. Or it's variance and they just got around to calling it again. Either way, yeah, man, I'm surprised Darnold still has like a neck, because it's been like 4, maybe 5 games where he's had his head twisted by a face mask. And he's still like out there trucking, I guess. Yeah. But yes, they called it, and yeah, it was fake. I mean, I'll admit, on the 4-minute drill, they scored with like 150 left or something like that. They scored real fast, right? That was the Justin Jefferson, the one we were just talking about. And when Jefferson scored, I was like, I'm not going to tweet that it was too soon, but I'm certainly going to think it. I'm certainly going to be like, man, I don't like how this is going to turn out. But hey, Theo Jackson knocked it out. Don't got to work. Well, that was Theo Jackson was on the subsequent drive. They stopped him. Great. Thought the Vikings would close it out that drive. Technically, they didn't. But they got close enough that Seattle had like 30 seconds left. So I was a little bit less confident, despite the omen from the gods after the face mask call, suggesting that the Vikings would win, because it's hard, right? You see all these signs, and they don't tell you good things, and you don't have faith, and it bit me. I gotta bleed. I gotta have faith.
It might be about time, because the Vikings have been winning these types of games this year. It's great. It's unlike what we have seen before. Let's also talk a bit about Hawkinson was getting involved, especially on third down, and is a wonderful little security blanket for Darnold. with him and Addison, this is just such a great receiving core this year, and it's just so fun to watch. And Hawkinson seems to be able to bail Darnold out of just about everything, even if the ball looks like it's about 5 feet over his head.
Okay, so, and he did do that. I will say Hawkinson did lose a third down catch that was very contested, but it was a super tight window throw that hit him in the hands. And so this would turn from a good game into this turned it from an outstanding game into a good game. Obviously, you would have liked it, but Hawkinson was pretty good in this game. He technically only had 2 catches, but like as you mentioned, the ball is kind of reeling out of his catch radius in a lot of these. In fact, we actually have a listener question related to one of his catches, which is that that Sam Darnold seems to throw the ball a little bit high sometimes. That happened, and Hawkinson kind of reeled it in, had 2 first downs in this game, I think. But yeah, no, he's been great. I think that in other games, he's been a little bit more reliable than in this game, but I think that he was just as critical, kind of like in terms of closing out the game. Like Van Ginkel was critical in closing out the game, and Jefferson was. Hawkinson certainly was. But yeah, I mean, with this receiving core, like you mentioned, Jordan Addison, DJ Hawkinson, you can also throw in Aaron Jones as a high-level receiving back, and then also, on occasion, Jalen Naylor, who actually has done well when he stepped up. It's a good group. Oh, also there's like a Justin Jefferson guy or something in there that I forgot to mention. It's a pretty good group.
So, the live show, you had gone off about the wide receivers for the Seahawks. How do you feel like they performed? And do you feel like they performed better than their Vikings counterparts?
I will say that Metcalf, until like near the end of the game when he was really screwing it up, the box score says he only has 3 receptions, and that feels wrong. I will say Metcalf seemingly outperformed what I thought he would. Again, the Seahawks receiving core is a core that I think is one of the better ones, right? That was a controversial take at the live show. And I think that's still true. The fact that Jackson Smith-Njigba nearly got 100 yards, got 95 and a TD on 8 receptions, I think that speaks to it. He was victimizing Byron Murphy for most of the night, but he got some over on, I want to say, Shaq Griffin, and then on the occasions when he's matched up against a linebacker like Blake Cashman, he also got a couple of yards there. In fact, I think he was responsible for like Cashman's like worst missed tackle attempt. So it's not bad. No, I think I continue to be correct. I think that this is, which I know is a shocking sentence coming from me. But no, I think this is a top tier receiving group in the league. It's kind of funny because when we had Griffin on, I was like, hey, I love this receiving core. And he's like, well, I wouldn't. I think Seahawks fans tend to overrate it, and which I didn't feel great about because I was the one saying it was good, but I'm not a Seahawks fan.
Well, you say that, but
I'm not, and it's just sometimes these coincidences kind of you can kind of seek patterns in random noise. That's why humans are wired. I think that's what's happening here.
That's an interesting thing to blame it on. Go on.
But I mean, that's the only explanation for your misinterpretation. But yeah, no, I think that they did show out, that they actually did demonstrate kind of like why they're so well regarded. Now, Tyler Lockett didn't get all the yards that maybe he would have wanted to make this a really rock solid argument, but I don't know. I think they're good. I mean, we saw Stephon Gilmore get so frustrated he gave up multiple penalties. We saw him lose on a couple of targets. There were a couple of drops that, obviously suggest that the receiving core didn't do their job, but a couple of these drops also suggested that the cornerback group couldn't cover these guys. And that seems to be a little bit more sustainable. And so I think that we've seen some really good stuff from this core. The problem is I think that it's difficult for all of them to come online at the same time. I don't just mean like, hey, the Seahawks run a lot of 12 personnel, not as many 3 receiver sets, so you're not going to get all these guys going off at once. That's not what I mean. I more mean Tyler Lockett is old and Jackson Smith-Njigba is young. They're not all going to be good at the same time. So that's like the one thing, is that you're not getting any of these players' peaks occurring at the same time.
Well, let's talk about the defense. The defense was able to eventually get to Geno Smith, but despite the fact that Geno was running around on one wheel, he was still able to move around. And the Vikings were just kind of waiting for Geno to do Geno Smith stuff. Yeah,
it was pretty frustrating, especially in the first half, right? So like, In the first half, the pressure rate on Seattle was much lower. I want to say it was like something like a 20% pressure rate in the first half. And then at the end of the game, it like shook out to be like 35%. I'll check the PFF stats real quick. But the second half pressure stats were much better, right? And I think some of this was Geno getting rid of the ball a little bit faster. I think some of it was when they moved the pocket, you didn't get a defender kind of attacking the pocket or implicating the pocket. The movement happened in the pocket like beforehand. And, when there was pressure, he was getting away from it, which is a really frustrating thing when like he doesn't have a knee. Like you would think, hey, feels like it should not be difficult to get pressure on this guy. He had a pressure rate. Okay, so his game end pressure rate was 47.8%. So it ended up being extremely high at the end, but at halftime it wasn't. But yeah, he was like getting out of these sacks, and it was just like, how, dude? You can't walk, much less run. By the end of the game, of course, the Vikings kind of turned that around, right? They were able to get consistent pressure on him. He wasn't able to escape. Van Ginkel got like a pair in there. We got another sack from somebody else in there. Like that was a really great fourth quarter performance. But for most of the game, he was either escaping pressure or mitigating it in some way. Very frustrating given how poor the interior offensive line is and like how injured he is. So yeah, he was kind of getting out of stuff, and credit to him, but it somewhat embarrassing for the Vikings defense. The Vikings defense that honestly, like in the final analysis, they didn't play poorly. They just didn't play up to their standards.
It was a bit interesting to watch the whole DK Metcalf situation, because it felt like he was going to be a much bigger deal, especially as the game started out and he was getting all these targets, and people were very surprised at just how much he was getting. And then the play at the end for him was not a good look.
All right. Yeah. No, I mean, Metcalf getting a lot of targets, doing a lot at the beginning of the game, forcing Gilmore into stupid mistakes. Great. And then you're right, by the end of the game, it's really kind of going sideways. So obviously the interception by Geno, by Theo Jackson, a lot of that's caused by DK Metcalf's poor route running. He makes a decision that Geno disagrees with, I guess is the best way to put it. The quarterback expects him to be somewhere. He goes somewhere else. Pick, right? Not the only instance in this game where he's got a little bit of poor route running. He's like rounding off some routes. He's allowing receivers to get kind of underneath them. That was kind of always the deal with him. Like that's kind of what separates him from somebody like AJ Brown, guy with a very similar like athleticism, size, profile, same school, I think, if I remember correctly. But like AJ Brown is like a much better player, because even though he doesn't have the exact same athleticism, he's not, as fast, although he's still quite fast, and he's much more agile than DK Metcalf. He's a lot more technically refined in terms of what he does. And so that kind of what separates him. And we saw that on that final pick, right? Great that Jackson kind of identified what was going on, where the ball was supposed to go. Great job at kind of cutting underneath the route. All of that. Really good. Don't want to take it away from Jackson, but a lot of that is that just Metcalf not reading the defense correctly, not understanding the situation. So, yeah, I mean, he's getting a lot of targets. I think this is probably one reason why Seahawks fans are not as enamored with this receiving core as outsiders like, me, because I'm not a Seahawks fan. I'm an outsider. Why outsiders are a little bit more kind of high on this group. It's because, mistakes like that.
It was an ugly mistake. And it's easy to see why somebody would get frustrated with that. But let's talk a bit more about the defense. The defense was it looked like they were ready to stop a run that never happened. Like this was not a game where the Seahawks decided to run the ball that much.
Yeah, again, like you said, like you would have expected that based off of the conditions, but Kenneth Walker only had 8. He got injured again, I think, partway through the game. Charbonnet only got 1, which was, I thought, crazy. Kenny McIntosh actually got 3 somehow. And some of the runs are like Jackson Smith and Jigba, kind of an end around. Julian Love, that's a fake punt, which, by the way, bad replays from Fox, probably didn't actually cross the line to gain. But that's that aside. Yeah, they didn't seem to want to run the ball much. They weren't that effective running the ball. They had a couple of, like I mentioned at the beginning of the game, they had a couple of runs at the beginning, plus later when Kenny McIntosh was in. But yeah, I mean, Geno Smith threw the ball like 40 plus times, right? Which, I mean, he did it well, right? So you understand where it's coming from, but they didn't really run the ball that much. The Vikings certainly were kind of not built around stopping the run or anything like that. They're obviously kind of like a quote unquote pass first defense in the way that they kind of design their defensive concepts. But I think that they expected a lot more in terms of the running game. And those like first and second downs, those rare ones where they don't blitz, they're probably working to play the run. You don't see that happen that often. So now there's kind of a mitigated pass rush because they expected to run. The coverage isn't as clean. And without the pass rush, you're kind of exposing Shaq Griffin and Stephon Gilmore to be the kinds of players that a lot of people were afraid they'd be when they signed with the Vikings. So yeah, it kind of an interesting situation there. But in the fourth quarter, when it was obvious that they were always going to be throwing the ball, the Vikings were able to ramp up the pressure really significantly, get a couple of sacks and force those turnovers. But yeah, I think that a lot of the and the defense is tough, right, to kind of figure out because they forced so many 3 and outs in that game, and they still allowed like 24 points, which is higher than the points per drive average that the Seahawks had. I'm taking a look. They had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 7, 8. Yeah, in the first 3 quarters, they had 8 drives, and any drive where they had secured a first down, they ended up scoring on. So 3 of those drives. The other 5 drives, they didn't get a single first down, right? So it was like very feast or famine. So it's like part of it too, is that the Vikings defense performed decently well, reasonably well. But when they didn't, it was like getting rolled over, right? And you don't tend to remember the 3 and outs as much as you remember, these like really upsetting drives where they get to move the ball downfield. So a really weird situation, I think, for the defense. Like you said, they were a little bit focused on stopping the run that never came. The pass rush plan in the first half wasn't working out. They might have had the wrong personnel on the field for a couple of these snaps, and the Seahawks took advantage of it, and then they get first down after first down. But yeah, I mean, I wish I could say that they tightened up a little bit. It felt like maybe they were going to, but then, late in the game, they allow a touchdown. They benefit a little bit from a missed field goal. I say only a little bit because they defended the Seahawks successfully enough that they ended up having to take a super long field goal. That was part of it. But yeah, really up and down day for a defense that, a lot of people, me included, consider to be the best in the NFL. Like you probably should be doing better than this version of the Seattle Seahawks.
It was frustrating because it kept feeling like this was a situation where they should be doing better, but like you kept putting it in the Seahawks' hands and hoping that the defense was going to come up with something.
Right. Like when the offense has a couple of 3 and outs, which, by the way, that occurred throughout the second quarter, right? So the first drive, they did really well. The second drive, they get 2 first downs, they have to punt. But after that, so like in the second quarter, they have 5 drives. Only one of them gets any first downs. It's like kind of the inverse of what the Seahawks were doing. And that gives the ball back to the Seahawks. That gives them so many opportunities to hurt the defense. And that leads to, 24 points. Again, that doesn't sound like a ton, but given the standard that we've been expecting this defense to perform at, it's like a pretty reasonable thing to kind of be upset about if you've got a standard, but that's better than that. It's frustrating because they're so good, and the plays where the defense are good are just a little bit less obvious than the plays where they kind of mess up. And then the Vikings offense in this game kind of exacerbated it by putting the ball back into Seattle's hands, like you said, on a pretty consistent basis. And so in a lot of those drives, Seattle's not getting anything done. And then suddenly they get like their 5th chance in the second half to get something done. And they drive the ball for a minute, score a touchdown, 88 yards. Like it's kind of annoying that they're this inconsistent, but I guess you would take it over like the really consistent but bad like consistently bad defense that they had before Flores.
Yeah, this is good, and I do want to take a moment and just recognize the Gink in all of his glory and his 2 sacks that he was able to get on Geno Smith.
Incredible work, and he had a really great game overall. He had like 9 or 10 pressures, just outstanding work there. A lot of his pressures were based off of him like beating the blocker ahead of him, which is important because it tells us that that's more replicable. It's not like the design of the Vikings rush unit created a lot of free opportunities for him. He had an outstanding game for sure. Also pretty decent in run defense. But yeah, getting those 2 sacks, getting another 9 or so pressures on the guy. Incredible work from Andrew Van Ginkel.
So we got Andrew Van Ginkel. I'd mentioned before that Harrison Smith was like a late injury. Was a bit of a late scratch. So who ended up kind of taking up his mantle and attempting to fill his role out on defense?
Yeah, it was the game-winning pick guy. It was Theo Jackson. It's so interesting because the Vikings, when they have a safety injury, especially for one like Harrison Smith, most teams would be like, okay, we got to stop doing this 3 safety BS. Right? That's what the Packers did when they were doing a bunch of 3 safety, and then one of them got injured. They're like, yeah, the third guy is not. Let's not do that. Let's not play this game. And so they would revert it to 2 safeties for a while. That's what a lot of teams would do. The Vikings don't do that. They had Theo Jackson step up and play the Harrison Smith role. And he did a pretty good job. Obviously, he did an outstanding job grabbing the game-sealing pick. But overall, outside of that, he did a pretty good job. I'd say he did a better job than Gilmore did, whose first half was really bad. He did better than Byron Murphy did, who gave up over like 100 yards. And those are cornerbacks. We're talking about a safety. But like, I think that he does deserve that kind of shout out because of how difficult it is to continue playing at a high level when you're like replacing a legend and something like that.
Yeah, it was he was a late scratch. Ham was I was expecting Ham not to play. Ham did. Ham even got a catch.
Got a catch.
Good for the fullback. There was one play that I just want to mention that stuck out to me, and Kevin O'Connell has since said that the battery in his headset went out, or that they were having headset problems at that particular moment. It was the Sam Darnold scramble for nothing, and he just went down after he realized that he didn't have anything available, and he needed to keep the clock moving.
Yeah, heads up play, honestly. Like making sure that you, when you don't know what's going on, finding a way to make sure that you understand like what the actual goal is on a particular play, right? Which is not, it's usually get the most yards, right? So usually you don't have, so when you knock yourself out of that contention into another contention, which is we got to, maximize the clock drain, you make different decisions. That's awesome, right? Obviously, you hope to expect that out of every quarterback. You didn't. The Zimmer version of Kirk Cousins wouldn't do that. I do remember he strategically did take a sack to extend the clock, so maybe it's unfair. But generally speaking, he doesn't kind of adapt his approach to the situation. Hey, and Darnold did, right? Like, I think a lot of quarterbacks would try to save that play and throw the ball and actually stop the clock. And I think Darnold did a good job turned out to be like a 10-yard sack or something like that. And it's like, we'll get it back in the punt. Don't worry about it. But it was pretty clutch for him to figure out like, hey, this keeps the clock going. I'm just going to do that. We're going to be working backwards, but that's less important than draining the clock. And he was right.
So the Vikings win. The Vikings are in a situation where with the Eagles' loss, thank you, with the Eagles' loss, they are basically in control of their destiny. If they win against Green Bay and then win against the Lions, that's pretty much it. That's first place in the division. And since we, I guess the news of the day is that the NFL finally recognized that the 325 game was terrible, and they have since replaced it with the Vikings-Packers game. So that so we have the prime spot for that. We are, if we win that, we get Detroit in Detroit, and that should be really fun. But things are moving in a direction that is very positive. This is a team that is so much fun to watch. And there are moments where you just sit there, oh yeah, I agree with just about every coaching decision that Kevin O'Connell is making. It all seems to make sense. This isn't a situation where, like for the Jags, where you're going, why are you calling the timeout? Or whatever the hell New England is continuing to do. Their coach is out of his mind, and they're going to bring him back. But this is a fun team. That things are going so well. And it's, I'm not saying it's time to believe, but this is the sort of team that does well in the playoffs. So we'll see.
I mean, see.
I'm staring down the barrel of the optimism shotgun right here. I'm aware of the situation, but like, it's hard not to believe when you see the defense get how many takeaways is it? Is it 30 now for the season? It's ridiculous. This is a team that consistently gets turnovers. This is a team that continues to be very good on defense and frustrates other quarterbacks.
Yeah, we're looking right at the optimism shotgun.
This is an offense that can get it done.
Yeah, it really does. I wouldn't call it a team of destiny, although obviously the teams of destiny that the Vikings have had have not fulfilled what we would traditionally regard to be their destiny.
Right.
But this is a team that, like you said, plays the style of football that seems to work pretty well in the playoffs. A lot of it, obviously, is just being good at football. But like, I think some of it is like having good situational awareness, having a good understanding of ways to adapt to the ways opponents adapt to you. I've mentioned before, right, that, you know, defenses are taking unique approaches to the Vikings because of Justin Jefferson. And so a lot of the stuff they do, you don't see on film. So you have to adapt a lot, you know, in the game. And then offenses are playing uniquely against the Vikings because the Vikings have the most unique defense in the NFL. And so a lot of the stuff that they're doing, they haven't put on film yet. So the Vikings have to constantly adapt to what teams are doing to them. They've done a really good job of that. By the way, I just looked it up, and the Vikings are second in takeaways with 30 to Pittsburgh's 31. That makes them fifth in turnover takeaway differential, or I guess not, actually tied for fourth in turnover takeaway differential at plus 10. So yeah, again, and we'll talk about the sustainability of turnovers when we get to that question in the mailbag. But yeah, I think that the Vikings are a high quality team of the type that can win a couple of games in the playoffs. And if you're the type of team that can win a couple of games in the playoffs, if a couple of things bounce your way, suddenly you're the kind of team that can potentially win a Super Bowl. Not likely, right? I don't want to say that it's likely, but certainly it's more on the table for this team than it was for like the 2022 squad that I kept on bagging on, right? Yep. That I kept on saying, hey, it's not sustainable, all that. It's different. Does that mean they'll win the Super Bowl? No, I don't think so. I think it's unlikely, but this is a team that it feels like you can have a lot more confidence in these games coming up than you could in some of the past Super Bowl iteration teams.
It's just so weird to watch the Vikings in the fourth quarter down a score and be like, oh yeah, no, they're going to get this. Like, this is, and it's in Seattle, a place that we don't win in. Oh yeah, we'll stop them.
Yeah, just take care of it.
We'll score, and we'll end up stopping them. That's just how these
down by
work.
4. Looks like they're gonna need a touchdown. I'm interested to see how they do that. Not like we're doomed. Right?
Now, I do want to say that I don't think I would have gone for a 60-yard field goal in the rain and wind in Seattle. I would not have done that.
Yeah, well, you don't have the stones.
I clearly... That thing was 5 yards short. Like, if you look at the replay, that thing was 5 to 7 yards short. I would not have made that mistake.
You you don't have the belief needed to say, yeah.
Well, they don't have the record, which is also to say that like their kicker's good. Like Jason Myers, good. I have him in several hell leagues. He is doing very well for me, but that was.
Well, he's no Cameron Dicker, but
no, or Brandon Aubrey, the consensus number 1 draft pick next year. But
yeah, Brandon Aubrey's gonna but I think Boswell's gonna be up there. Hell league stuff. It's gonna be Aubrey, Boswell, and maybe Dicker, maybe.
I think you're right. Anyway, yeah. The 60-yard kick. It's so odd to like watch a Vikings team and go, oh, I agree with what they're doing. This all seems to make sense. Kevin O'Connell, really good at challenges. It's weird. I don't know what it's like being in a good relationship for the first time in your life. And you're like, I don't know what to do with my hands. Like this is, I don't understand what's happening, but I am really enjoying Sundays. So there's that. Let's talk a bit about the round the league stuff. Obviously, the Eagles losing is big news. Jalen Hurts going out with a concussion that he tried to wave off with a thumbs up.
That was, it's a concussion. You want to take it seriously. You can't be like, it was kind of funny that he wanted to play. But it was kind of funny that he was trying to, he's like, thumbs up, I'm good.
Like that would have worked about 10 years ago. So
it really would have, yeah.
Yeah, it's like if Favre would have done that when he went out.
People would be writing about it. They'd be like, yeah, that guy got his bell rung. Not confident he remembers his own name.
Nope.
But man, what a throw. It
would have been, God, it would have been what's his name? Terry Bradshaw. Get clocked on the side, or you get clocked.
Yeah.
And then he's like getting he's getting like stretchered out. He puts his thumb up. Nope, I'm good. I'm gonna fight this up. I will return to the game. And then he it's that sort of thing. Like it doesn't work like that anymore. But that was fun. Good for Washington. Terrible defense on that play by the Eagles. Really enjoyed that. Ravens are what was funny about the Ravens Steelers game to me is that they had said before like 9 of the past 10 games between the two was a 1-score game, and then the Ravens blew them out.
Yeah, I was on a podcast with Jarrett Bailey, who covers the NFL at large, but also does have a focus on the Steelers. We were talking about basically every game on the schedule. We talked about this game. And I think the Ravens were favored by like a touchdown. And mind you, the Steelers were missing a ton of defenders, and they only barely kind of confirmed that TJ Watt was going to be in the game, right? And so they're missing a couple of guys. And I think George Pickens, but we were talking, and he's like, every one of these games is close. Every one of these games is close. And I was like, hey, I know Russell Wilson's playing well, but have you seen Lamar Jackson, dude? Have you seen this guy? He's pretty good. And he's like, Lamar Jackson has never beaten the Steelers. And I was like, well. But yeah, he's like, the last time, it was Snoop Huntley and Anthony Brown. I was like, those are some names. Holy crap. I totally forgot that. Speaking of like Lamar's poor immune system, that guy is winning one of our hell leagues. The guy whose name is Lamar Jackson's immune system.
Yeah.
That guy is
that's me.
That's you.
Yeah, that's me, actually. I'm
killing
currently
it in our league.
Yeah, it was like it was Lamar
the little
Jackson.
CDC profile.
Yep. Lamar Jackson's immune system is my team in that particular league.
We could be meeting each other in the finals, James, if you just had the courage of your convictions. Anyway,
I'm not changing the scores for that free kick. We talked about it last episode.
The free kick is a once in a half century occurrence, and yet, anyway, people who listened to the last episode, I lied. I did have a stake in Cameron Dicker getting those points, but anyway, Lamar Jackson is probably going to win a back-to-back MVP. I think that he's probably the favorite too. If it's not, it's probably Josh Allen. Josh Allen fans are like really mad because it's been like 2 consecutive years where he's played at an MVP level. He's not going to get it. Yeah, it's life. what was this? Russell Wilson didn't even get like a Pro Bowl vote or an All Pro vote for like almost his entire career until everybody made a big stink of it, and then he got 2 All Pro votes or something. That shit happens. I don't know, man. But this Ravens team is good. This is probably the year, that you're best advantaged as an AFC team to take a run at the playoffs. Like, you don't really have to worry that much about the Bengals. The Bengals even going to make it? They're probably going to make it. But the Bengals are just not good this year. You don't have to worry, obviously, about the Steelers. The Bills are playing really good football, but they're not playing as well as they did 2-3 years ago. The Chiefs, they're always the Chiefs, so you don't want to like knock. But like you get it, right? Like,
the Bills' defense is not great. The problem with the Ravens is the pass defense for the Ravens is not good.
It's not good either.
You can go over the top on them, and I feel like it may just end up being like a 40-40 shootout between the Bills and the Ravens. They're
kind of, which is weird to say about a Ravens team, they're kind of built for it. So this is like a year for them to really take a run at the AFC, just because all these other AFC teams are a lot weaker than they typically are. Well, typically the Chiefs are better. Typically the Bills
haven't scored more than 30 all year.
Yeah.
If you're going to put up 40.
Yeah. This is the year. So really excited for the Ravens. Hopefully that bears out, because Lamar kind of deserves a little bit of playoff success after all the stuff that people have been talking about him for. So, yeah, I mean, outstanding game, though, against the Steelers. But, yeah, I think he's probably going to get the MVP.
So, was it more satisfying to watch the Raiders nuke their draft pick level, or was it more satisfying to watch the Cowboys nuke their draft pick?
It was so funny. Before the Cowboys game, like, they're asking like Micah Parsons, like, hey, so why would you play hard? Right? Like, you're eliminated now. You got eliminated 3 hours ago. What's the deal? And he said something like, you gotta play for pride or whatever. It was like a lot. Everybody received it really well, and I was like, that's a weak answer. I'm sorry. I don't buy it. And then they just demolished the Buccaneers. Yeah, maybe pride's worth a lot. We probably have the pride to win games that matter, but certainly that's a good step. Yeah, man, the Buccaneers looked, I don't want to say they looked bad, but they did not look good at all. And that Cowboys secondary somehow came alive finally.
Waiting for it all year, and it was alive twice. It was alive for week 1 against Cleveland, and it was alive now against Tampa Bay.
Yeah, so great timing. But
little
yeah,
late.
I don't know. Like, yeah, a little late.
Well, what did you learn this week?
That's a great question. I don't know. Like, you watch all these games, and as we get closer to the end of the season, there's like a lot less to learn. Like, we just talked about that Eagles game. I think we're learning that we can probably trust the Washington Commanders, which is like such a strange sentiment.
There was a thing out there that said that like the number of touchdown passes that he had was the same as Mark Rippon in 91. And I'm just in there just like, boy, it has been that long since the Redskins were that good, huh? Like, I remember that Super Bowl season.
Yeah, that's
I think that was
crazy.
like the first year I really watched. I was like, oh boy.
By the way, that 91 team was cracked. Like, if you take a look at the historical DVOA and stuff like that 91 team was insane.
If you look at, you got Mark Rippon and Art Monk out there, like, that's, Art Monk is just such a great name, but he was such a wonderful receiver.
Yeah, and like could do tight end stuff too. Like, just great. Yeah. So Commanders, trustworthy question mark, I guess. Kirk Cousins, the problem. It turns out Michael Penix should have been starting way sooner, because I think his numbers weren't good. Like, I think like yards per attempt or EPA, they weren't great. But you watch the game and you're like, oh, this guy's like way, and mind you, it's against the Giants, right?
That helps. Like the people getting the number 1 pick, yeah,
right. But he looked pretty good. He threw 1 pick. It wasn't his fault. It was basically Kyle Pitts like shoveling a lateral to the opponents for some reason.
Kyle Pitts being Kyle Pitts.
Right. Yeah. Just a eternal Florida disappointment, Kyle Pitts. But like he looks kind of good. Bryce Young, he looks kind of good. He's been looking kind of good for a couple of games. I got a bunch of Panthers fans mad at me because I called him a small Victorian child.
But he
sorry.
is.
Yeah, he is. Yeah. Like, that's just the truth. The Bears look worse than I expected, which is saying a lot.
Boy.
That was rough.
It was rough, but
rough.
It wasn't as rough as I watched the first 3 scores of tonight's game, and I turned it off. I turned on Elf instead. It's like I turned on Elf. I started working on the show notes, and I messaged you, and I was like, I'm ready to record whenever. I'm not dealing with this. Yeah,
I was like, I'm in the middle of eating, and you're like, all right, well, see you in 8 hours.
Look, I've eaten with you before. I know how this works.
No, I take forever to eat. No, it's fair.
Yeah.
A lot of people are like, Arif, I think one reason you take forever to eat is because like you talk all the time. And like, yeah, I'm not going to deny that that's a contributing factor, but I was not talking during this game, and I still took my sweet time eating. So it's just a thing. People have to deal with it.
Yeah, we all have to deal with it. Yes, you were correct.
Yes, everybody but me. I don't mind. Bo Nix, still a fraud. I'm glad I can continue saying that. It's just one game, doesn't matter. But yeah, sure. 2.2 yards per attempt, or average depth of target over the first half, the lowest of any quarterback in any half of the season.
It's so funny.
Incredible. Just, yeah, it's like the narratives reemerged. It's fantastic. Yeah, I don't know. Like Joe Burrow looks pretty good. Not that it matters. The Dolphins are not going to fire Mike McDaniel. I don't like. There was like before the week started, people were talking like, yeah, they're going to fire their GM. They're going to fire Mike McDaniel. I was like, really? They're going to fire Mike? Are you kidding me?
That seems, unless he's completely lost the locker room, it feels premature for him.
They're 7 and 8. They don't have a quarterback. Like that's a little aggressive for me. I doubt it. But hey, they beat the 49ers. 49ers probably not going to give Brock the contract he wants after this season. So yeah.
The comment on Brock Purdy has always been, yeah, but he's got all these weapons. And right now he doesn't. And so now I guess you're seeing what that looks like.
Yeah. So yeah. I feel like a lot of these kind of confirmed. Like there were a couple of surprises, like the Patriots just kind of putting one over the Bills for a while before the Bills were like, all right, we gotta stop playing games. But yeah,
I don't think that there's a game for the Patriots this year where I have understood whatever the hell their coach was doing. Like every game, he does something that makes. Like call something that makes absolutely no sense, whether it's just a random timeout or all right, we're gonna be kicking it here instead of not. Like it just, I don't get it. I don't know if Robert Kraft is in love with him and like has decided this is our guy for the future. We had Belichick for X number of years. We can clearly get this amount now. Like it's amazing. And Drake May isn't bad. It's just, I don't understand what their coaching is doing. They can't stop anyone. It's beautiful.
It's incredible. And like they've got like good defensive players. Like I think Christian Barmer's out for the season, but like they've got like Christian Gonzalez, they've got like Deatrick Wise, like they've got like some pretty good defensive players. And yeah, they just can't do anything. But hey, I'm not going to say they nearly beat the Bills, but they nearly beat the Bills. Which is kind of a crazy situation to be in. I know that speaking of like coach firing rumors, I know that there was like hey, Gerard Mayo is gonna remain the coach unless something catastrophic happens in the final 3 games. I'm like, oh, that's just a pretense to fire him. And then this happens, and you're like, oh, maybe something catastrophic won't happen in the final games. Good. I like coaches getting more than 1 friggin' year to like figure out if they can be kind of like franchise leaders. So
do you think Zimmer's upset that the good performance of his defense is going to cause McCarthy to get re-signed?
Oh God, that would be so amazing. I mean, it is going to be amazing. I don't know about would.
Like I want him to be fired so that I can take the job. Like,
well, it was really funny because like I think who who was it? Someone on the radio today was like, yeah, the thing that people don't understand is that Jerry Jones is actually very loyal. And I was like, what do you mean don't understand? Jason Garrett held that job for like 10 years for no reason.
Yeah.
Of course he's loyal.
We know that. The rule is that he keeps a coach on for at least one season too many. Like that's like his thing.
The only time he like really like makes a push at not showing that kind of loyalty is for a coach he already loves that he shows like Sean Payton, right? Like that's kind of it. So I don't know, but yeah, Mike McCarthy is probably going to get extended. Mike Zimmer, no longer a coach. I think Mike Zimmer's going to stay on for at least one more year because the whole reason he rejoined the NFL was because he's like, I didn't want people to think I was a bad coach. Bad reason, by the way. People thought you were a really great defensive coordinator. You could have just like let that one go. Like your approach to defense has fundamentally altered NFL history and the way NFL plays defense. You could have just let that go, but no. And now that the Cowboys defense is very good, I think he's going to try and stay on for one more year and like prove he's a good coach. So we'll see.
I mean, fat cats get slaughtered.
Fat cats get slaughtered.
That's the one thing I know. Let's go to the mailbag. And Washington Irving has this question. Speaking of Mike Zimmer, what do you think made Mike Zimmer the most angry this season? Rick Spielman still getting occasional work in the NFL, Alvin Kamara going for 180 yards and 4 touchdowns, or Kirk Cousins having the second best game, or having his second best game and winning against his vaunted defense?
First, I just want to say, what an honor to have like a noted novelist Washington Irving, famed. What do they call it with AI? Hallucinations. Famed hallucinator Washington Irving.
Excellent.
So the historical work is maybe not stood up the test of time, but hey, he is the reason we think George Washington chopped down that cherry tree, and also why Santa Claus has a sleigh? I don't know. It's got a lot of crazy stuff he's responsible for. Anyway, thanks for writing in, Mr. Irving, the first great American novelist. I don't know. Thanks for writing in. Edgar Allan Poe hates you. I hope you know that. But that's true, by the way. I guess. But what makes him more mad? Generally, like a really good question. But I think the Kirk Cousins one doesn't make it. Well, maybe it makes him more mad. So Kirk Cousins gets benched, but has his second best game against his defense. And like, this is a guy that's like benched. So he doesn't get his revenge game against Kirk Cousins. That's fair. I think Alvin Kamara, again, going off this time for 4 instead of 6 touchdowns, that's got to hurt. I don't think he loves Rick Spielman occasionally getting work in the NFL. I think that's lowest on the list. I think it's either Kamara going for like 180 total yards, 4 touchdowns against him, or Cousins going off. And I think he just hates Cousins more. I think Kamara's a thorn in his side. I think it's been a consistent issue for him, but I think he just hates Cousins more. So I'm going to go with that one.
Next question is going to be from Raul, who asks, as we face only playoff teams for the rest of the season, what do you think, or what do you feel the Achilles heel of this team is? In his article, Bill Barnwell points to Darnold's high sack rate. I would favor something else like inconsistent pressure on the opposing quarterback. Obviously, the actual Achilles heel is the football and non-football gods, but what say you?
So the actual Achilles heel is sometimes the Achilles heel. I think.
I mean, it was last year, yeah.
Yeah, it was last year, so I want to like carve out an exception there. Like sometimes it is. But yeah, putting aside, by the way, Rahul from Carmel, Indiana, putting aside the vagaries of the football gods, I'd say it's not necessarily Darnold's high sack rate, although I think Bill Barnwell makes a good point. I think it's just the quality of the cornerbacks. Like, obviously, Stephon Gilmore's had some really big moments. Byron Murphy's played really, really well this season. Shaq Griffin, especially recently, has had some really good moments. But I think overall, it's just not a consistent or talented group. Bunch of great names, bunch of Pro Bowls, a Defensive Player of the Year award on there. But that cornerback group is just it doesn't have the horses to compete one-on-one. It usually doesn't have to because of the pressure. But I think as you get into the playoffs and as you play these playoff teams, that matters a lot more. Being able to win those one-on-one matchups. And I know it's like a zone defense, and I know it's not like one-on-one matchups in the traditional sense. But at the end of the day, a lot of times these corners are on an island, right? Whether that's in zone or on man. And I think not having quite the talent level that you need is the bigger issue to me. Yeah, the sack rate is a problem, I guess. But I think that's part of the play style, and the play style is generally pretty positive. I think it's this cornerback group.
Next question is going to be from Tommy Gunn, who asks, for the 13th time this season, the Vikings opponent has lost the game. Earlier in the season, I wrote in joking about this, but now I feel like it's getting out of hand. What must be done to stop this rash of bad luck infecting every team we face? Now, it's not like in past years where it seemed like all we were doing was facing backup quarterbacks. Was that 2022 where it was like every backup quarterback we just kept playing? It was a beautiful streak. I loved it, but unsustainable.
Yeah. We were trying to figure out like the different kinds of magics involved, etc. Yeah, no, Tommy Gunn, that's a really great point. That it just a cruel, vicious cycle of Vikings opponents just having bad luck, I guess. It's just unfortunate that Geno Smith threw 4 picks and had 2 of them caught. He should have had 0. Just real bad luck. Which we didn't even talk about that in the recap. He threw 4 picks, but Shaq Griffin dropped 1. Blake Cashman dropped 1. It's cool. Yeah, it's just. I mean, they missed a kick. Geez, how often does that happen? That's awful luck. Yeah, I think the Vikings are just going to have to get exposed. #exposed. That's the only way. Which brings me to the latest Twitter fight. I guess it's this podcast very often is just an update on the fights I get into on Twitter, right?
Basically, especially with Bukowski.
So, I tweet out the link to my game. I'm like, hey, the Vikings won another close one. And Bukowski quote tweets it with, I mean, this is a family show, so I can't quote it verbatim. But he basically said the baloney continues, right? Maybe that's the family-friendly way to say that. So I quoted it with the Vikings, team tiers and EPA per play. The Vikings are like 4th or 5th. It turns out having like the 3rd best record while being like 4th in EPA, not that weird in my opinion. And then he gets into a fight with me about like how I changed my tune because I was calling the 2019 Packers frauds. And but suddenly when it's the Vikings, I don't call them frauds for winning close games. And, I should have been more consistent. I should have said that about the 22 Vikings, which like I know that you all know how much during the 2022 season I kept on insisting this team was fraudulent, right? Like I know all of you know that, and I'm so comfortable in the knowledge that I kept on calling out how unsustainable the Vikings were in 2022 that it kind of shocked me to my core. Like I felt like I got hit with the pan, right? Like a frying pan to the head. That he was like, hey, why didn't you call the 2022 Vikings frauds? It's like, that's all I did. What are you talking about? Yes, I called the 2019 Packers frauds. Because guess what? They were frauds. Frauds. Easy. And he's like, and it's just like, and I was like, hey, but like you agreed that I called them frauds. And he's like, no, in this tweet, in the text of the tweet, I'm saying that you're not calling them frauds. I'm like, well, watch the podcast that you linked to, because at like the 12-minute mark, I said that they're frauds. Like, I don't know. And so I was like, hey, Bukowski, have you like internally decided to analyze this? Because it feels like you didn't call the Packers frauds when they had a bunch of close games, but then the Vikings did have close games and you call them frauds. So if I'm inconsistent about this, surely you must be. And he was like, well, what about you? And I was like, okay, this doesn't answer that question, because it's just like, that is whataboutism. I'm just trying to figure out like why you're not being hypocritical here. And I was like, well, because I use a lot of measures here. I use, EPA per play, I use DVOA, I use win probability, I use game scripts. And all of these things tell us that the Vikings are like good this year in a way that the 2022 Vikings or the 2019 Packers were not. And it seems like you were using all of those arguments in 2022 and are not using them now when the Vikings are good at those things. And he didn't seem to respond to that one for some reason. You must have lost it. I'll remind him.
It's very possible. It's also very possible that he has forgotten about what happened in week 4 this year.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, that doesn't count because that was early in the season, and when you're strategically picking your endpoints.
Oh, speaking of picking, 3 picks from Jordan Love that game.
Pick that shows it. Yeah. It jogs my memory, the word pick for some reason.
Weird how that works.
But like one of the people that responded to the essentially just an image of EPA per play was like, well, that's all early season stuff, which is like, okay, so I guess that doesn't matter. If I only looked at like the last 8 games, the Vikings are, oh my God, they're still 4th. That's crazy. Wow. That didn't change at all.
Let's just look at the last 4. Oh, okay. Yeah.
Actually, yeah, if you look at the total record, actually in the Vikings' last 8 games, they have a better record than they have over the course of the season. So honestly, I don't know, man. The team's undefeated by your measure.
It's wonderful. Just wonderful. Let's go to Eric the Red, who asks, are the turnovers the Vikings have been forcing a product of luck or skill or both? On the same note, what celebratory dance should Cam Bynum do when he picks off Jordan Love? I mean, at this point, you're looking for, I think at this point, if he's going through the hits of like early 2000s, late 90s, he's going to have to grab something from High School Musical next.
Well, that would be great, but I would really enjoy the Saturday Night Live What Is Love?
That's good.
And I think it might be difficult to convey what you're doing with because it's just the head movement.
Yeah,
but you are standing stock still while doing the head movement, right? So
but you can do the pointing, like me, you, him, me, you. Him.
Yes,
you can do that.
Yeah. So I think if you I think that's the way to do it because what is love? Baby, don't hurt me, etc. I think that you're good. I think that because it is a lot of like 90s and 2000s like family comedies and stuff like that. Fair, love it, keep it up. But I think in this case, you're for the SNL skit. I know technically it was also an SNL movie. We don't got to talk about that. It's an SNL skit. I think that's the way to do it. As for the turnover question, it is a bit of both. And the way I want to explain this is that the opportunities to create turnovers are a product of skill. So if you look at stuff like defensive turnover-worthy plays generated or defensive fumbles caused, that is somewhat stable. The offense still has a little bit more control over the number of turnover-worthy plays in a game than the defense does, but it is relatively stable. The problem is interceptions only occur in about 60% of turnover-worthy plays. As we know, fumble recovery rate is 50%. And so they can come in bunches when a defense is pretty good at it in ways that are beyond their kind of sustainability. I would argue, and I haven't looked at the defensive turnover-worthy play rate, so maybe that's something kind of worth taking a deeper look at, but I would argue that the Vikings are very consistent at a relatively stable skill, which is forcing quarterbacks into turnover-worthy plays. We saw 4 of them from Geno Smith, right? They are a little bit above average at converting those into actual picks. I think their fumble recovery rate is about average, so I think their ability to cause fumbles is what's kind of giving them the advantage here. So I would say that in the Vikings case, it is a little bit of skill and looks like a significant amount of luck. But yeah, I think if you were only to look at interceptions, it'd be a pretty fair question. But when you look at kind of the broader context of how interceptions generally occur in the NFL, I think that the Vikings are doing a pretty good job. It is still really difficult to rely on that, game by game, because no matter what, it's still a low frequency event. like a turnover-worthy play or a turnover-worthy throw happens on about 3% of throws, and so you're just going to have some games where that doesn't happen. So that it is volatile, but I do think it is relatively close to what we would call like skill-based.
Well, let's go to the mailman who asks, grungy win. All apologies for box score surfing. The game wasn't in my region, so the tape is super unknown. But it seemed like Geno struggled to find an even flow and didn't really feel alive. How was the defense able to leave him outshined? Was it an extra man in the box?
This is so good. And it's so much better if you can see the question, because I know a good chunk of our audience has already picked up on what happened in this game, in this question, which is a bunch of references mostly to like actually just not even just 90s, like grunge music, right? Yeah. Like Pearl Jam, Soundgarden.
Seattle based. We're all very proud.
Yeah. Super unknown, by the way. Not a lot of people reference like the album titles. Mm-hmm. Great job.
And great album.
Anyway, the answer to the question, it seemed like Geno struggled to find an even flow. It didn't really feel alive. The defense did not do anything particularly different in this game that they've been doing all season. I know that for the past couple of games that their blitzes have been kind of tagged with man coverage a little bit more often, which Freeze Football noticed, I think, last week. So props to him at Freeze over Freeze Football. But I think, and again, I haven't broken it all down, but I think that they still maintained a relatively high zone percentage. They still maintained a really high blitz percentage. I would say that James is writing something super funny. I would say that they didn't do anything particularly new or unusual. And in fact, I was a little bit frustrated in the first half that they didn't really collapse the pocket as much, given, how weak that offensive line is. And they missed a couple of opportunities with like some pretty poor tackling. But when it came to harassing Geno Smith in the second half, really high blitz rate, again, above 60%, really good pressure rate by the end of the game, over 40%. And that created some of the turnover-worthy throw situations. So I don't think they did anything new or different. I think it just kind of started working.
I mean,
it's true. You finished writing out this crazy question, James?
I don't know what you're talking about writing. This all just comes off of the top of my head, but to me, it felt like they kept Geno in a heart-shaped box. Mm-hmm. He was looking California, but feeling Minnesota by the end of it, and
that's a good cut.
That was leaving Gink feeling like he was the better man.
The better man is such a good. Sorry, I just love that. So good.
Let's go to Michael, who asks for James's psycho killer Kasa corner.
You've been really screwing up.
I don't care. I don't care.
By the way, this time Michael just wrote out Kasa. Mm-hmm. I think he was just sick of trying to get James to pronounce the French words in a very famous
Talking Head song.
Talking Head song. I was going to say killer song. I was going to script the whole bit.
Yeah. Here we go. I enjoy when I can bend other people to my will, so thank you, Michael. Is Sam a true psycho that thrives when he is in pain? Feels like the last couple of times he's gotten hurt, he's immediately led the Vikings on game-winning drives. In this case, what happened was he looked like he got a bit rolled up on his ankle, got right back up, and proceeded to throw that touchdown to Jefferson that looked beautiful.
Kasa. I wouldn't say that he thrives on when he's in pain, but yeah, that's a good observation that like he gets hurt and then balls out. Okay, so again, I've never watched an anime in my life, but I'm told that in Dragon Ball Z, which I'm told is different than Dragon Ball Super? ? Right? There's like a couple of these balls, right? There's Dragon Ball GT, and it's just Dragon Ball, right? Like that's probably the first one. In that, there's a race of alien monkeys. Again, anime is weird. I don't watch it. That when they get hurt, they get stronger, or after they heal or something, they get stronger, and that's like kind of their deal. And that's like revealed in Dragon Ball Z, I guess, early on in that one, which it is one of the Dragon Ball shows. And maybe that's Sam. He like goes into the blue medical tent, which is like a healing pod. I guess like the healing chamber or something that they call it in this anime. And when he comes out, he's stronger than he was before. Kind of like that anime that I've never watched. So maybe that's it. I think more likely is he's really good in high leverage situations because he's got pretty good situational awareness, and I think his high volatility style of play lends itself well to taking the chances that you need in those situations, like that crazy dot to Jefferson. I think it's just his style of play and his awareness gives him advantages in those situations, and like those occur late in games. And if you're good in late game situations, it will appear as if you're good coming off of injuries because you're probably not injured to start the game. The injuries occur and pile up over the course of the game. So I think that's what happened.
Let's go to our next question, which is from Jack Rackham, who asks, the Vikings defense seemed to play a lot of zone that above average quarterbacks pick apart. See final drive of the first half. Is this a concerning trend that will be their Achilles heel in the playoffs? A lot of concern about Achilles this episode. Or am I being overly dramatic?
I think in the Ender's Shadow series, it's pronounced Achille. What will be their Achille heel? That's a reference that. What percentage of the audience do we think will get
zero.
That? Like 10?
0.
5?
0.
Okay, Ender Shadow's very good. Look, Ender Shadow's very good.
Is that one you've seen before?
First of all, it's a book series because I read. James.
Give me a. I've been working on this stupid thing. I have 2 books I would love to be reading right now. I even picked one up when I was down in the cities last week. I would love to be reading right now, but I can't.
Well, this one doesn't have pictures in it, James. So I don't know if I can recommend
Neither
it to
of the two. Actually, the one that I have does have pictures because it's a historical thing from the late 1800s, talking about it's late 1800s, talking about it's called the Black Donnellys. And if you don't know who the Donnellys are, they're a crazy murderous group that lived in Canada. You'd appreciate it. They killed a lot of Canadians.
Oh, I'm all about this. Hold on.
Yeah, mock me for my lack of books, but hold on. The one I'm reading is a banger.
Anyway, the Ender's Shadow series. So I don't even remember what the question was anymore. The Ender's Shadow series is Orson Scott Card calls it a parallax novel to the Ender's Game series, or at least to the Ender's Shadow takes place at the same time as Ender's Game does, from the perspective of 2 different characters. And I think what obviously happened here was Orson Scott Card was like, I think it's stupid that I have to like cross-reference every single individual detail to make sure that they line up for these 2 novels that occur at the same time. So I'm just going to say they just take place, like that's just what happens when 2 different people look at the same event. Genius move, but also very funny how lazy it is. But in that series, the main character is kind of the small brainy kid from Ender's Game, Bean. And in that one of the primary antagonists is a kid named Achille. So I just, it's something to keep in mind. Okay. I'm glad we got that out of the way. I think that it's not that good quarterbacks do a better job at taking apart zones. I think that there are certain offensive designs or approaches that do a better job of taking advantage of zone coverage, but I think that once you get to a particular skill level at quarterback, you generally do not get better versus zone versus man. I know that we break this down a lot in advanced like football analytics. We're like, hey, so-and-so is like, 30%, better against man coverage or whatever. Very often that is a blitz stat in disguise because a lot of blitzes occur in man coverage. So sometimes it's not really that. And because that doesn't apply to the Vikings, holy crap, I just realized the listener's name is Jack Rackham. In the Ender's Game series, one of the major characters is named Rackham. He's like the major or the general or something. So it's all full circle. Sorry, we got a lot of sci-fi going on in this episode.
Apparently.
Yeah. I don't think that the 2-minute situation problem for the Vikings is specific to their inability to be effective in zone coverage. I think there's probably something else. I haven't named it yet, so it's not a very compelling argument. I'm sorry. But I think it's probably something else that makes them particularly bad in these 2-minute situations. But they are pretty consistently worrisome in these 2-minute situations. So is that an Achilles heel? Yeah, I think, unless they solve that very quickly. That's a big problem. Like, they can't just rely on the offense always having the ball at the end of the half.
All right, couple more questions here. Dayglow Jones asks, it seems like the ball sails on Darnold from time to time. The first quarter toss to Hawkinson could have been a much larger gain if he didn't have to go up for it. Is that just who he is, or is there something up with his hand? It looked like his pinky was taped up on Sunday. He'd mentioned before, or this is not the first game that he's done this, but he's had his pinky taped up and said it wasn't hurting him.
Yeah, I don't know what the deal with like taping it up when it doesn't hurt you. Maybe it's to just protect it because it's attached to another bigger finger or whatever. But I don't think that there's anything wrong with his hand that is causing the ball to sail. I think it's just more because he is a quarterback that tends to throw off platform quite a lot, even from the pocket. That's just going to happen a little bit more when your mechanics are inconsistent. The ball is either going to go over or under. And while it is technically a little bit safer for the ball to go under, most quarterbacks will err towards throwing it over because A, it's kind of embarrassing when you dirt a ball, Donovan McNabb, but B, it feels like you're giving your receiver a better chance. And that's kind of true, actually, because receivers are generally much better at catching, passes that are like a foot above their chest than a foot below. Like it's just whatever it is that they are better at that. So I think it's just mechanical shifting all the time will sometimes lead to that. I think it has less to do with like his hand.
Next question is from Cam Xstorm, who asks, what are some of the differences and similarities between the Case Keenum 2017 season and the Sam Darnold 2024?
I think there's a couple of things here. So one is Case Keenum was living off of a variety of really, really unstable performances. And by that, I mean, we saw an unerringly high contested catch win rate, even from two receivers, Adam Thielen and Stephon Diggs, who for their career have above average contested catch rates. The 2017 season was like near their best ever for both of them in contested catch win rate. That's one. Two, Case Keenum took on a lot of pressure because he was holding onto the ball a lot. Plus that offensive line was not like the world's best offensive line. But his sack rate for like, I think a good like 13 games or something like that was like 2%. It was a crazy low sack rate. And that's just not going to happen for you. It's going to regress in the other direction, right? I think also Keenum wasn't, when he's like moving around in the pocket, he's not like navigating the pocket to identify where the ball needs to go. He is chucking it up and praying, and it works out. And Sam Darnold is really different in those ways. So they're both very aggressive quarterbacks. So those are the similarities. They both hold on to the ball a fair amount, especially this version of Sam Darnold, the 2024 version of Sam Darnold. Both hold on to the ball a lot. So that's a similarity. They both like giving the receivers a chance and seeing if they can come down with a contested catch. That's true as well. But Sam Darnold has a stronger arm, and so he can kind of cash some of these checks that Case Keenum can't. He's taking on actually an above average sack rate instead of a below average sack rate relative to his pressure rate. So if anything, that'll probably regress back. Sorry, apologies to Bill Barnwell on that one. But he is very cognizant of where the receivers like actually are, which Keenum like kind of wasn't. And it just was working out because he knew where they were supposed to be. And the thing about Adam Thielen is that where he's supposed to be and where he is are often the same, at least after the first 2 seconds of a play. For the first 2 seconds, it's kind of, he's going to do whatever it takes to get open, and he's not going to be running a traditional route. And it doesn't matter because he got open and he's where he needs to be when he needs to be there. So great. There's a couple of differences there. I think also that 2017 defense, it is difficult to explain like how insanely good that 2017 defense was. Like the 2024 Vikings defense is probably the number one defense in the NFL. Maybe the Chargers is up there. Maybe the Broncos is up there. They're probably the number one defense in the NFL. But the difference between them and the 2017 Vikings, or them and the 2017 Jaguars for that matter, I think is like pretty significant. That was a crazy defense. They're the best third down stop percentage in NFL history, which, mind you, I think it only gets recorded back to 1989 because they weren't doing third down stats before that. Whatever. Best third down stop percentage in NFL history. Crazy good defense.
Well, it's just off of what you said, this year it might be the best. There's two others that might be able to claim it. That year, no. That year, that was the best defense. That and the Jags were. There was a reason why the Jags and the Vikings were in their were in the division,
in the respective conference games without like a quarterback.
Yeah,
yeah. Like these were outstanding. So I think that's like a difference too. Is that like Keenum is living off of like this. I think like of the defenses that decade, right? Obviously, you've got like the 2013, Seahawks. You've got the 2015 Broncos and the 2015 Panthers, the 2017 Vikings, Jaguars, the 2019 Patriots, right? All of those are up there. When we list this decade's defenses, the 24 Vikings defense is not going to be. It's going to be interesting, right? Because it's got this crazy blitz rate. It's not going to be in like this conversation that we're having about these defenses. So that I think is a really big difference. So that's like, I think those are kind of like Sam Darnold is producing an offense that is helping win games. Keenum is there for an offense that did help win games, maybe sometimes when it was necessary. So I think there's like a couple of differences there, but they are scrambling quarterbacks that take chances and throw off platform. And like, I get where some of those similarities might come from, but I do think that the way Darnold plays is a lot more sustainable. And mind you, this is not like, at the time I was calling Case Keenum unsustainable, right? In the same way I was talking about 2022 Vikings, 2017, I was like, this guy's going to blow up in the playoffs. And lucky for me, he did. That validates the take. But like, there were a lot of signs that what he was doing was just not going to bear out. And while I do think that because Darnold plays a volatile style of football and therefore might just have a bad game, because that's what happens when you do that kind of thing, I don't think it's of the same character. So I think those are the differences.
Let's go to Zach Dixon, who asks, using advanced metrics like DVOA and EPA per play, is this team historically good enough to win it all? The hope levels are rising to an all-time high, and I need to know if it is valid.
So I looked up the DVOA of the last 15 Super Bowl winners, and they ranked anywhere between 12th and 1st. Obviously, an over proportion of people ranked first in DVOA, because when you're the best team in the NFL, you've got a little bit of a better chance of winning the Super Bowl. That's not even like an understatement for a fact. Like, it's only a little bit better of a chance. But you had a number at 2, a couple of 3, I don't think any 4s, a couple of 5s and 6s. And then like there's like a 10 and a 12, and the 12 was like the 2011 Giants. Like, okay, fine. Weird. As the Giants are, right? Just weird. Fine. So yeah, the Vikings are like 6th or 5th or 4th in these measures. Certainly, they've got the kind of team that could win a Super Bowl, and in historical terms often has. They are not the Baltimore Ravens, who I believe are number 1 in DVOA, right? They're not the Buffalo Bills, but hey, I don't know that the top teams are like the top teams, or the Detroit Lions, of course. The top teams are like the top teams like you would in a normal like year. I think that it is a little bit flatter. I haven't checked like the distributions of DVOAs over the past couple of years to see if that's true. It feels true to me, and so for the purposes of this answering this question, it is. So yeah, it is historically good enough to win it all in ways that other Vikings playoff teams like were not really. So yeah. The thing about opening up your heart is that it is easier to stab you in it. Like that's, and I am kind of advocating that, but like it's kind of the only way to live as a sports fan. At some point, you got to believe. We're here. It's time to get hurt. It's time to get hurt.
Eldon asks, question for Arif. CJ Hammock During the Bears game, CJ literally carried Cam Akers in for the touchdown. Shouldn't that count as a touchdown for Ham? And can they have a play design where Ham just princess carries Akers into the end zone with the football?
Would definitely, but like I would ascend into heaven were that to happen. Like when Carson Wentz got like officially benched for Jalen Hurts, like benched. And I ascended into like another plane of being, right? I had like achieved nirvana, which it turns out I've learned is not a permanent state, but a temporary state that one hopes to access and help other people access over the course of their lifetimes. Becoming one with everything and seeing the beauty of the universe. Incredible experience. I hope everyone gets to experience what it's like when Carson Wentz gets benched for Jalen Hurts. So too would James experience that if Ham princess carries Cam Akers into the end zone for a touchdown. But the nature of the fullback position is that you don't get that credit. It's not for you.
No.
You're doing it for others.
What a selfless man. Yeah,
just like the Buddhist monks who have achieved nirvana and have come back to the material plane to assist others into achieving oneness. CJ Ham, ever the teacher.
If he makes it to the Pro Bowl, I may need a CJ Ham Pro Bowl jersey. I think.
Oh God, one of those awful ones that everyone confuses for like a Bills jersey. Yeah,
exactly. That's what I need. I'm not pronouncing this. For Reef's a bunch of letters corner, what is the biggest threat to Minnesota's path to the Lombardi Trophy? A very good interior D lineman or Saquon Barkley?
So I think it's corner.
Great. I'm gonna say that the cough syrup is not letting me pronounce that. So, what is the bigger threat?
I probably. Well, we already talked about the football gods, right? So that's the biggest threat. Very good. I would say it's Saquon, right? Like, obviously, very good interior D lineman. That presents a problem given that the Vikings have very bad interior O lineman. I understand where you're coming from with this one. But, like, it always just feels like when push comes to shove and the Vikings collapse, it's some MFer on the other team's offense that's really just grinding your gears, really putting the screws to you, right? That's what it feels like it usually is a product of. Not always, right? Like I remember when Kirk Cousins got absolutely blown the F up by the Green Bay Packers, and it was just because the Packers had figured out how the boot action worked and they just stopped chasing the running back. So sometimes it's not just some dude on offense that's like really making your day bad, but it feels like it usually is. That's the thing. And it doesn't have to be an elite player. Sometimes it could literally be Chase Daniel or Nick Foles. Sometimes that could just be it. It could be a Cooper Rush, but like, you know, it feels like Saquon Barkley maybe. So I'm going to go with that one, but I do think that a very good interior defensive line is going to cause problems.
Next question.
A lot of Achilles tendons getting slashed in this mailbag.
It's unfortunate. Skimbleshanks the Railway Cat asks, I just watched a young man named Bryce Lance.
I can't believe that's real.
Apparently he has a brother. Name. Apparently he has a brother who played safety in the NFL, or at least in practice. He made an incredible one-handed catch to lead NDSU to the national championship game. How high should the Vikings draft this obvious superstar in the making?
So here's the thing about Bryce Lance. One, not a real person. Two, I saw a couple weeks ago him drop an easy go-ahead touchdown. That's all I need. That's all I need to know. NDSU was on their fraud path and the FCF fraud-offs. We know how rigged they are. Hold on, is Montana State still in it? Let's take a look at the FCS playoffs. Oh my God, Montana State is next. Yeah, let's go, Bobcats.
As a lifelong Bobcats fan,
I think it's Bobcats. Okay, every time I click on a Montana State thing, they just say Montana State. I'm just gonna Google Montana State football. We'll see if I was right about it being the Bobcats. It is. I was right. That's because I'm a lifelong fan.
Mm-hmm.
Go Montana State. I was like, Montana State's going to show NDSU what's what. And I didn't really expect that to happen because I did genuinely believe NDSU was going to lose before they got there. But yeah, we got it. Montana State, crazy quarterback situation. By crazy, I mean awesome. They've got an incredible passing game. In the last game, they went 22 for 25. This is a kid that I think transferred as like a true freshman. Outstanding player. He's been like an offensive MVP forever. I've actually heard of this guy before I faked being a lifelong fan. That's how good this guy is. So Montana State's going to run through NDSU as fate has decreed.
This is the way.
Yeah, this is the way. So I don't got to worry about that or this Bruce Foles person. I don't know what this guy's name is.
Not important.
Yeah.
Let's go to Nolan Kaler, who asks, for North Code, listeners from the Great White North were delighted to hear Arif's argument for a Most Outstanding Player award, as it's something that the Superior League has been doing for many years. What other ways would Arif like to see our poor American cousins honor their best players that doesn't discriminate against their positions?
Just because you got like the one thing right. Because like what is that game? Like 3 downs, 12 players, you can move forward at the snap, or one of you can. You can get a 1-point rouge. This is an obscene game, an abomination against football. Also, the width of those fields, the length of those fields, 110? 110? God gave us the base 10 system for a reason. And
I mean, metric is based in, basic, especially in base 10.
No, because God also gave us the United States. You got to understand.
Okay, my bad.
There's two things
again,
happening.
The cough medicines is doing it for
right.
me.
No, I understand. Yeah, I'll forgive you this time. But 100 is a nice even number. The fact that the 100 comes in yards instead of meters, that's just going to have to be part of it, and you're just going to have to live with that. But 110 or 120, I guess, because I don't know, the end zones are weird and big for no reason. Awful game that they have up there. Truly awful. But I will say, the fact that you do have a most outstanding player instead of an MVP, like that is better. But I don't blind squirrel. It just happens.
Yeah. Ingram's left foot asks, could you sink a 40-yard kick in the cold to win an entire stadium free pizza? No.
No.
I kicked before, and no.
I played soccer for a while. Once, so I was a fullback, and once the goalie went down, and they were like, Arif, the smallest guy on our team, because this is before I had myself a growth spurt.
Earth.
Yeah. This is before my growth spurt. The smallest guy on the team, Arif, you should be the goalie. And I was like, I've never practiced that. Have we never practiced not having a goalie? Not a question I should ask, but certainly one that I had answered in the moment because suddenly I was the goalie. Sorry, goalkeeper.
Yes.
So, I'm from Minnesota. They're called goalies in hockey, But I was like, okay, I'm just gonna play this like a sweeper and not like a goalkeeper because that seems insane. But I did have to do a lot of goal kicks, and I gotta say, if you are not the best person on your middle school team at goal kicks, you're not kicking a 40-yard field goal in the goal.
No.
That's not happening.
That's just not going to happen. Let's go to Italian Charlie Kelly, who asks for Arif's jersey justification corner.
Okay.
It might as well be New Jersey, actually. I am in need of a new Vikings jersey.
Oh, okay.
And I am trying to decide who to get. What would be the best option in the same great/funny combo, such as Arif's Case Cookus jersey, or a guy I know has a Packers Blake Bortles jersey.
That's good.
Who would be a better option? Would it be Josh Jobs, Myles Gaskin, potentially throw out here Josh Freeman.
Okay, so that was my answer. It was Josh Freeman. Dobbs is fun. Yeah, I don't think it's funny. I think it's fun. right? I think that's cool. Having your little Pasternak moment was genuinely like exciting and cool. That's fine. Myles Gaskin is a little funny because he just kept on getting cut, but I felt like it just wasn't enough for it to become kind of like the bit that ended up being. Like CJ Ham is great because that's a bit. Also, like he's been on the team for like a while. He's like a special teams captain or whatever, right?
You get like a Chad Beebe jersey.
Like a Chad Beebe jersey would be good. I'm trying to think. Any long snapper, especially like a historical long snapper, that'd be good. A Brock Lesnar jersey would be good.
I think we saw one of those at the game. Now that I'm thinking about it, yeah,
perfect, yeah. But yeah, like it's got to be like a guy who like learning that he was on the Vikings is really funny. That's a meme, right? For that to be kind of like in that funny territory. And I mean, Josh Freeman was so funny. A McNabb jersey would be kind of funny, I guess, but it was just so painful.
That's more sad funny, like when a clown dies or gets hit by a bus.
Yeah, that is sad funny. Are you all right, James?
I'm blaming all this on the cough medicine.
Okay, sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe a Kluwe. Nah, no, that one's kind of obnoxious. I like Chris Kluwe, but that jersey's probably obnoxious.
It's that one that kind of crossed the line. It would have been good when he was on the team, and then as like the fallout happened, it stopped being as funny.
Yeah.
Let's go to Damien, who asks: a few weeks ago, you discussed potential quarterback reclamation projects for Kevin O'Connell to work on. Where would Kirk fall in this list?
Holy crap. It's incredible. So I saw someone refer to Kirk today as like this year's Russell Wilson. Is like, oh my God. Yeah, the San Francisco could be like, you're our guy.
I would be curious to find out the number of bathrooms in his home in Atlanta.
That's, yeah. Because, I mean, reasonable chance I don't actually know how many touchdowns he has this year. Reasonable chance the bathroom to touchdown ratio is off.
It's not great.
It's not great. I think it's just the better question is like, how bad would Cousins' market have to be for both the Vikings and Cousins to be like, yeah, why not? I think Cousins would retire. I think he only wants to be a starter, so maybe that doesn't actually work. But quarterback reclamation projects, Nathan Peterman's still floating around in the league. That would be amazing, right? If you can turn Nathan Peterman around, what are you doing drafting guys in the first round at quarterback?
Can you imagine if you could turn around Carson Wentz?
He's a quarterback, not tight end.
Oh, okay, my bad.
Yeah. And Carson Wentz is about to win a ring again as a guy on the sideline.
Yeah.
So, yeah, good for you, dude.
What a legacy.
Yeah. But yeah, no, I think I think if you can get Nathan Peterman up to a starting quality player, you are the best coach in history.
Yeah. Let's go to Will Melvin, who asks, hypothetically speaking, would Arif give up his ownership stake in the Chiefs if it meant people would stop making Seahawks jokes about him?
I feel like at this point, like a good chunk of people don't know the Chiefs ownership story. I'm not going to tell it. That's for a different podcast. You're just going to have to wonder why that's a bit. I do like dividends. I do like earning capital gains, which are taxed at only a 15% rate, something that I just happen to know. But I would give up all of that to stop the Seahawks jokes.
Also, what was the coolest and most memorable gift you got as a kid? Presumably around Christmas time.
Right. Well, first, the first gift that I got that I remember is convincing my parents to celebrate Christmas. Something that my brother, 8 years older than me, could not apparently do without the help of a spoiled younger child. So that was the first gift.
That was really your first debate victory.
Yeah, of many I would have over my brother. We argued about debate like literally last night. It was perfect. he did Lincoln Douglas, I did policy, so I had to debate like facts and things about the real world, and I had to bring evidence.
You were throwing note cards at him. That's just how that works.
Right. So I had to have a good command of what was going on in the world, and he could just make stuff up, I guess, was his deal.
Yeah, that's what we do. It's great.
But most memorable gift I got as a kid, I got like this little. It was just like a little motorized car on a track thing, and you just build the track however you want, and you could make it into like a Rube Goldberg machine. I think it was called Big Loader or something like that. I was really young, but you could make it like you could have it like take like you had a little like dump truck and a tractor and like all of this other stuff that you'd have on this motorized path that you'd like just turn on and it would follow this preset thing based on what track it was on. And you could have it like fill up the dump truck and then like unload it into another thing. It was awesome. I loved it. But the tracks, you'd connect them together. And once they were connected together, despite this being like a theoretically modular toy, it would be impossible to take it apart. Like you could pull it. And like I thought for a while it was because I was a child who was weak and needed help. And then my mother couldn't do it. And then Rashad couldn't do it. My brother. And then my dad couldn't do it. And I was like, oh, this toy that I thought was awesome sucks. And that is when I lost my faith in corporations and products when I was about 6. So that's where I am now. And that taught me a lifelong lesson. Also, I may have thrown a tantrum about these tracks. And I may, in my quest to force the toy to fulfill its promise of modularity, thrown it against some stuff. I don't think I was a problem child, but certainly that was a problem moment.
No, you just believed in an open door policy. That was all. Let's go to now. If I have to answer this question, I remember getting rollerblades one year. Back when like rollerblades were like a big thing. And I remember trying to learn, and I was actually really good at it after a while, but I remember having to learn on my parents' linoleum in the basement. And that took some skill to figure that out. I remember that, and I remember the Etch-a-Sketch, but it wasn't like the flat Etch-a-Sketch. It was like one that was like a globe. So there was like you could like write all around the whole thing.
Etch-a-Sketch? That's crazy.
I remember that was like I think that was the last gift my grandpa ever gave me. But like that was like I remember that one specifically. I
can't believe the globe heads have taken over the true flat Earth model, the Etch-a-Sketch.
Yeah,
and have turned it into a globe. What won't the globe heads corrupt?
It's unfortunate. Need to fly the whole lot of them down to the South Pole to figure these things out.
Literally an hour ago, I just told Rashad this story. He had never heard of I guess I call it the final experiment, which clearly that has not stopped a lot of them, but great.
Let's go to Beef Brewski, who always likes to torment Arif. As we all know, Christmas is fundamentally an eschatological, maybe?
Yeah, what's that?
Eschatological? Sure.
That I like that pronunciation more. It's very funny and it sounds not safe for work, even though it's not.
Exactly.
It's a great pronunciation. Yeah.
In character. I'm blaming a lot on the cough syrup tonight, but
I don't think you would have nailed this one.
No.
Sober, yeah.
In character, representing the passing of an age and portending final judgment. Along these lines, would a strong playoff performance for the Vikings be an omen of impending doom?
Okay. Is Christmas fundamentally eschatological? I don't. Sure. Beef Brewski, you gave us a $50 word, but you did spell judgment the British way and therefore the incorrect way. So 0 points on this question. Would a strong player be an omen of impending doom? Yeah. Well, it wouldn't be a strong play, but I think a Super Bowl win would be kind of like the final sign that we needed that like, oh, the Antichrist is, being born. get Arnold Schwarzenegger or whoever to save the baby. I forgot, how does that movie go? Like saves the... Does he save the baby?
I think everybody dies. I think that's the moral of the story.
Okay, well, great. That's what happens here.
But yeah, everybody dies, but not everyone lives. Maybe.
What? This is some Left Behind stuff. I'm good.
Let's move from Kirk Cameron to Room Bolsharif, who asks for James's intimacy corner. Oh, that's a great one. Arif seems to have a problem with trusting people.
Oh God!
With never being married, his distrust of James's heartfelt gifts ahead of time at the live show.
Hold on, James. Have you ever been married?
That's a lovely question. His distrust of James's heartfelt gifts ahead of time at the live show, his not reciprocating said amazing gifts, and his general hatred of the Discord and his Bolsharif fan club. The question is, who hurt Arif?
Okay, I can answer this. So
he was asking me. It's my intimacy corner,
right? But I can answer this. So why does Arif distrust James? Why does Arif hate the Discord? And why does Arif dislike the Bolsharifs? Well, the answers are to who hurt Arif: James, the Discord, and the Bolsharifs.
That seems unfair to lump me in that group.
And Draw Play Dave.
Okay, well that's at least I'm in good company then. Don from Ohio asks, with the rising cost of the Lions-Vikings tickets for Week 18, my best scenario to afford the tickets is to take back all the gifts I bought the wife. Should I stage a robbery of our house so she doesn't find out what I did, or do you have another idea instead?
I think that you should sign the divorce papers she has probably served to you. I think that's how you resolve this. And while that will prevent you from buying Lions-Vikings tickets, it will also probably prevent a much worse situation down the road. So I think that it
saves him money too, because if he does buy tickets, he only has to buy one.
Yeah, sure. I don't know how many times a divorce saves you money, but yeah, sure, James.
I mean, I can think of one, but we're going to go to our final question.
James, you've never been married.
Well, we'll talk about that someday. Logan asks, question for Arif's gift-giving corner. Per your suggestion, I bought the Pelotons, and my wife is furious. She ordered me to either return all the Pelotons, or I'll be getting divorce papers on Christmas. Should I call her bluff? And in case it's not a bluff, do you have room in your garage? I do.
Okay, wait, hold on. When someone asks, do you have room in your garage, and it's framed in the context of this question, I don't know if it's for the Pelotons or for the ex-husband, right? Like it's one, right? Like,
yeah, but I mean, I've got a fair amount of space for both.
Well, you have something to do.
Yeah,
that's great. I do remember suggesting buying several Pelotons. So my history of not remembering what I've said on previous podcasts, a little bit spotty in this case. But in the spirit of that, I don't remember what my justification was, like why I would say that, given that you can just have all your accounts on one Peloton. And so you could maybe use them at the same time. I don't know, like the Peloton commercials with like TJ Watt and JJ Watt, they're both using them at the same time. But admittedly, they are living in different houses as well. I think sometimes it feels like they live in the same house in these commercials. Not a consistent canon in the JJ Watt, Peloton, and taco universe. There's like a one where they sell taco shells, whatever. And I guess is it Shield Sporting Goods? That universe too. So in that one, they live in the same house, but in the Peloton one, maybe they don't. Either way, I would probably return the Pelotons. I think. I don't know why I suggested buying multiple Pelotons.
Well, it made sense to you at the time, and
sure,
you can't blame cough syrup on
which
that.
It's probably what you should be telling your wife, that it made sense to you at the time, and that's really all any of us can do, is to operate within the parameters of what we know in the moment. You can't act with knowledge you don't have.
There you go. That's the lesson of today's episode, and that will wrap it up nicely. So we hope you've enjoyed this episode of Norse Code. Regardless of what happens at the end of the week, if we have a Packers preview, We will have the Christmas episode later this week, so enjoy that. Arif, what do you have to plug?
So for Wide Left Football, we have the Seahawks recap. I don't think Luke told me about his plans for this week. I think we both just kind of assumed he wasn't going to be writing for the Christmas week. Fair enough. So we're probably not getting that. I don't have a piece for Christmas or whatever. So that's just what's at Wide Left. When I get an update on how we did raising money, which for the Lavender Rights Project, which you can still give to, it is technically the end of a Reef week, but whatever. When I get an update on how much money we've raised, which is going to take some time because like it is Christmas and I don't expect them to be working like over the holiday, I'll give you an update on how much we did and what we were able to do. But that's over there. Again, if you want like some really long reading, we've got the 2-part almanac on the Brian Flores defense and what it's looked like in the 2024 season by Luke Braun. Otherwise, you can just poke around on the site for stuff like why the Vikings are sustainable despite the close game record, or the political pieces like the gambling piece that did really well, or the neoliberalism piece that people really responded well to. So that's over Wide Left. You can also give gift subscriptions. Some people have told me they've received emails that they've received the ability to give a free gift. Great. I don't know. Substack just automates that stuff for me. And I think they're having a Christmas sale. I don't know. Check it out. Go over to Substack. Go over to Wide Left Football and sign up.
So that is going to be it for this episode of Norse Code. Hope you guys have enjoyed it. We'll be back soon with more episodes. So for Arif, my name is James. Thank you guys so much for listening. Do not podcast on a bunch of cough syrup. And please remember that it's 4th and 12. You really think they're going to run here? And we'll be back soon. Norse Code is the largest and only division of Norse Code LLC. You can find Norse Code on the Daily Norseman, SB Nation's Vikings blog at dailynorseman.com. You can also find it on iTunes, Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Spotify, Google Play, and wherever fine podcasts are aggregated. Our Vikings blogger extraordinaire and generally useful human is Arif Hassan of and he can be found on Twitter at Arif Hassan NFL. I am your producer and host, and my name is James Pagashnik. You can find me at the show's official Twitter feed at NorseCodeDN or at my personal account at Big Mono. If you'd like to donate a few bucks to the show, you can do so in a couple of different ways. You can go to patreon.com/NorseCode and donate there. For $3.50 a month, you get bonus material and more. You can also go to paypal.me/NorseCode for a one-time donation, or you can go to norsecode.threadless.com and pick up some Norse Code merch. Any questions or comments that cannot fit in a tweet can be sent to norsecodepodcast@gmail.com. On behalf of the Norse Code staff, we thank you so much for listening.
Our formula is this.
All things are possible through the power of Ben DiNucci.